Welcome back, friends. We would like to continue the start of our conference with our distinguished guest and keynote from no other than acclaimed film, television, stage actor and producer, Mr. Harry Lennix. Harry Lennix is a distinguished film, television, stage actor, and producer. For the last 7 years, he has starred as Harold Cooper, Assistant Director of Counterterrorism for the FBA on NBC's Blacklist. Might I add, NBC recently announced that the series will return for its 9th season. Let me pause for 1 second to make sure my audio is good. We can move on. Thank you. Sorry for that interruption. Moviegoers will know Lennix from his breakout role as Dresser in The Five Heartbeats, one of my favorite movies growing up. General Swanwick in Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. Dawn of Justice Commander, lock in with The Matrix and The Matrix Reloaded, and the Oscar-winning Ray. It was recently announced that Mr. Lennix will be seen as superhero Martian Manhunter in Zack Snyder's eagerly anticipated Justice League and Snyder's animated series Army of the Dead on Netflix. Lennix made his Broadway debut in Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright August Wilson's Tony-nominated Radio Golf. Mr. Lennix's stage work earned him his first Ollie Award for his portrayal of Malcolm X at the Goodman Theater in Chicago, and 2 Joseph Jefferson citations for his starring role in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and Caught in the Act. The accolades of Mr. Lennix can continue on and on for hours, but I have to say we are incredibly honored to have Mr. Harry Lennix welcome you to this year's conference. I will now turn it over to no other than the distinguished Mr. Harry Lennix.
Well, thank you, my dear friends. It's great to be in your fellowship today. My dear friend and brother, who I have a lot of friends in common with, he knows what I mean, Edrick Rhodes. I also want to give a special thank you to Shauna St. John for this opportunity to address, as I say, people who I consider to be in the great fellowship of being educators. Additionally, it should go without saying, but it won't go without saying that I want to give a special shout out and thank you to Timberland and to Casey Coles, the twin daughters of Nat King Cole. You know, I'm a born and raised Chicagoan. You cannot mention Chicago, Illinois. You cannot talk about music that comes from Chicago that adds any great virtue without mentioning the great Nat King Cole. So I'm especially pleased to be here in something that is this important. And Nat King Cole, Generation Hope. All 5 of those words are profound to me. So just to give you a little bit of background, I had a speech all prepared, and I did a job yesterday, a couple of hours. I taped it. I made sure the cameras and all that stuff were set up. And, you know, sometimes the providences and the spirits out there do not intend for us to get together, but look at us, here we are meeting. And I just have a few words to share with you today. I'm actually working right now on a show that's called Destination Heaven. So if there are any interruptions, people knocking at the door, that's them telling me to get my butt back to the set, because get this, folks, I'm playing God, God the Father in this thing called Destination Heaven. Hopefully, when it comes out, you'll be able to see it. If you get Pure Flix TV, you should be able to check it out. But it's a great deal of fun working with some terrific actors and people. This is our first day on set. So in spite of all of the odds, here we are. And I am grateful to be among you. I will not be able to tell anyone here, in spite of the fact that for many years in the Chicago public school system, where my sister is actually a principal at Doolittle East, I was myself a music teacher, elementary level. I don't profess to have any great aptitude or proficiency as a musician. Not even sure if I had very much of it as a teacher, but I certainly loved it. And it is that passion with which I will share whatever it is that I have to be of benefit with you today. But I thought it might be interesting, since I cannot, from a pedagogical point of view, give you any insights that you were not already aware of. And as a matter of fact, I'm sure the techniques and the methodologies of teaching and instructing music have advanced quite a good deal. My last time in a classroom in any kind of official sense was in 1994, when the great Mrs. Gilly, Marcella Gilly, after whom I am naming a performing arts center, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. That was the last year of her being a principal, and that was my last year as a teacher. I then left to go to Los Angeles and New York to pursue a career in acting. But there's something about this profession of ours. There's something about this duty of ours, this obligation, if you will, almost a calling. What can we call it? A vocation that keeps me coming back. And I guess to some extent, it leads me to wonder, really, when we get down to it, what is music? And I guess I have some rudimentary idea of what it is. To me, music is really just a systemized, organized sequence of tones, sometimes stacked upon each other, sometimes in a melodic sense going along an interval of time that conveys a song, a melody, a meaning. But there's some sort of teleological element to it. And I guess the only way really to get into some of these comments is to get a little bit philosophical, a little bit theological. But the teleological argument has really been for years used by defenders of the faith to describe what God's purpose is. That's really what it comes down to. I'm sure you know already. What is the aim? What is the intention of music? And I think I regard it as no less than one of the great muses, the great philosophers, the great theological philosophers of the scholastic age, people such as Aquinas. Consider there are very many muses. Traditionally in Greek classicism, it's sort of 7 of them or so forth, but one of them, of course, is music, which we just discussed. But I think there's more.
Mr. Lennix, can you activate your video? Because we're getting a lot of people asking, can they see you?
You can't see me?
No, it just says your name.
Well, it's got the video here.
I'm sorry. There it is.
Oh,
hey.
Well, see, that was pushed before. I'll tell you, we're going to get past all of this technology.
We got
There's
you.
The spirit. There's the spirit. Thank you for pulling my coat there, Brother Edrick. But yeah, so just to get back to, I was discussing a little bit about the intention and the musings of these forms, these classical forms that we're talking about. And for me, and this is not the opinion of people like Aquinas, but it is certainly mine, there is no greater form, no greater expression of any of the art forms, including the one that I do for a profession, which is acting, or in directing and producing, that supersedes, supplants in any way music. It is the ability to express things that words simply cannot do, even though music can have lyrics and all of these things. Sometimes just those tones themselves. Curiously enough, these days, there's this new thinking that perhaps the Egyptian pyramids themselves, since the people who created those and built those did not have wheels, how did that stone get there? How did those huge monolithic building blocks come into being? And some people believe, frankly, that it was sound. And if you do experiments in laboratories, you can see that with the proper frequency, with the proper sound waves, you can literally move physical objects. Such is the power of what it is that we do. But the view from 30,000 feet, as it were, of what you are doing and what you are teaching, that is the education part of it, leads me to want to talk a little bit about what we mean by education. Education actually comes from this great, and this is again one of these Platonic ideas that Aquinas got into a little bit. Education comes from the Latin educare, which means to bring forth, to lead forward. And it's a pretty neat reach to think about the fact that when Plato came up with this idea of the allegory of the cave, where he supposed that there was in a cavern several prisoners basically who were tied together and who were compelled to look only straight ahead. They could not look behind them, where behind them were several actors who were casting shadows with the aid of a fire that the people who were bound together could not see. They were not aware that the shadows are being created by actual 3D people. And when they were finally released, they realized even after seeing that the people were making this happen, they still refused to accept the reality and wanted to look at the shadow. It's a fascinating concept. It's also a very provocative thing to think about Jesus in front of the tomb of Lazarus. This occurrence only happens in the book of John, but that he says, "Lazarus, come forth." It's a miracle of reincarnation, revivification that occurs. And so in large way, that is what you are about doing. This is no longer just this profession that we have engaged in because we love the sounds of whatever we grew up listening to. And of course, I'm of the opinion that whatever we come to learn early, whatever our earliest introduction to music is, establishes our orientation. It establishes what is orthodoxy in many ways. And so I've come to understand and come to believe in my own life that education, proper education in music, is not just a privilege, but it is a fundamental right. We are giving voice to the voiceless. If the people cannot speak who we are teaching, the children and students and even adults, their parents and those who have led them to this point, is get to them first in some ways, then we will be establishing for them what is orthodoxy. My earliest educational ideas about music come from a very classical point of view. I studied to be a priest when I was a very young man. My earliest forms of music came from liturgical events and learning songs in Latin and doing chants and all of these kinds of things. But it really did give me a great foundation. And I do not think in many ways that those things may be improved upon. But when I began to teach in Chicago in the Bass Elementary School, which is where Mrs. Gilly was, curiously enough, that had been a program that had been eradicated. The Chicago public school system, at least in that neighborhood, thought that it was better to have a shorter school day than to give people the basic instructions in things such as music, the arts, which they're not considered as important in the folly of the thinking as the STEM programs, the science and all of the mathematical things. Of course, music incorporates all of these things. And so to have eliminated it was a grave mistake, but I am grateful to have been able to, at least to some degree, reinstitute it. And I hope that it is still, actually Bass Elementary School is now a charter school. And so I hope that that has gone on. And here's just a little bit of a digression, but Craig Robinson, who you saw from The Office and so forth, was the great actor, does the Pizza Hut commercials. I'm sure you've seen him. He was the music instructor after I left Bass Elementary School. So if there are those of you who want to teach and then become an actor, go to Bass Elementary School and you'll be in good shape. But I wanted just to say, frankly, that I am deeply, deeply supportive of everything that you are doing. And you have in me, I think, a collaborator, a colleague, someone who I hope to be working in great correlation with as your program goes on. I know this is the 3rd annual Music Educators Conference. This is great, and this idea of Generation Hope, that this really is not just a matter of education, but now, frankly, a matter of life and death. You know, out of this pandemic, this darkness that we were talking about, leading people forth from, leading people out of the cave, the cavern of what was an existential crisis. 2 years were lost effectively of in-person learning, of socializing with our fellows, especially for the children in their formative years, to have been deprived that kind of engagement, that kind of one-on-one in-person instruction has an impact that we can only really guess at. These will be made manifest in the years to come. But you are leading the people forth. You are like the Messiah, like our Lord, leading Lazarus out of a cavern. What appeared to be death, it could actually be a great sign of re-engaging in life. And so the consequences, the wages are really no less than that. So God bless you in that. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I think we might be able to work together going into the future. And that is, a few years ago, I came up with this idea, not just me, none of these things, no great idea really can be given sole ownership, proprietorship to it. Even Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. We now have evidence that his first wife, Milena Maric, was instructive and very, very helpful in him coming up with this, and his conversations with people like Michele Besso and these people. So anyway, the point is that no one idea of greatness, of enduring quality can come from a single source. But this idea came to me that there should be, and now we have reason to believe that there will be, an African-American museum for the performing arts. And those arts that we will be covering in Chicago and Bronzeville, I promised you we'd talk about this a little bit, will include theater, film and television, oratory, dance, and music. And for me, the music is the most important part. We have actually decided to orient the theater, normally seen as a place of spectacle and visual accomplishments and coup de théâtre and all of this, but we really want to lean in heavily to the music because it is so important to the sustenance of life and of hope and of the things that the Nat King Cole Generation Hope is doing. My dear friend Edrick Rhodes, of course, is working with, in collaboration with the Kennedy Center, a place that I had the great occasion in 2008 to do all 10 of August Wilson's plays. But you know, you go there and you listen to a concert and it is like being in the womb of heaven, listening, being in the cocoon of sound, because the people who built that knew just how important the sound, the hearing, these things that really, they say when you're dying, by the way, that the last thing to go is your sense of hearing. And so that means that when we're living, when we're being born, the first thing that we could probably really count on is the sense of hearing. But we are in conjunction with doing the African American Museum of the Performing Arts. We are going to have the Lillian Marcy Center, which is where these entertainments will actually be going forward. And among our mandates is to, at the very earliest possible part of the education of children, the children in the immediate neighborhood of Bronzeville, those within a square mile, but eventually perhaps the entire city, eventually perhaps the entire country, and who knows, eventually the entire world. But our first order of business is to establish an education program so that we can early introduce to our students and our patrons. This is, of course, not a children's museum. It is not an amateur place, but it will be the highest level. My idea was always that it would be the Black Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. We can include very quickly in there the Kennedy Center. There is at this particular moment, to my knowledge, while there is in Harlem, New York, the National Black Theater, I do not believe that it has been in operation for some time. And I believe that our culture, which is the only perhaps indigenous culture that the United States has produced, everything else coming from Europe and many other parts of the world, but that which was born here deserves an institution that is worthy of these creations. And again, no one has surpassed what our culture has been able to produce in terms of music. I would argue also in terms of literature. I would argue also in the very sense of being able to survive. What can you teach this community about making a way out of no way and being able to survive the most impossible to imagine circumstances? You know, in Isaiah 43:19, it tells us that, behold, God is talking to Isaiah. Behold, for I will do a new thing. Even now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. And so even though we're not necessarily doing a new thing, the fact that this conclave of educators and teachers and instructors can come together to perpetuate this vital, vital form that we have is instruction. It is new. It's a new idea in some ways. It is a renewal, and that is extraordinarily important to me and to everyone on this call and to everyone who will be the beneficiaries of all that you have been doing and all that you will continue to do. So God bless you. Let us know how we can get in touch with this mighty and august institution at the Lily and Marcy Center and at AMPA. And we can't wait to work with you, to collaborate with you. There is no reason, just like we're getting together here in a virtual way, there's no reason that we cannot send information to each other, send instructions, send ideas and inspiration to each other, and eventually even in person. There's no reason that Nat King Cole Generation Hope can't have a permanent home at the Lily and Marcy Center or at AMPA. And there's no reason that we can't come and visit you, be it at the Kennedy Center or elsewhere. By the way, I've also been told I'm at Asbury University just at this moment in the college, the School of Communication Arts. And I understand that there's a certain person on the call, Weatherspoon, I think Brother John Weatherspoon, who might be here with us, who is getting his doctoral at University of Kentucky, I believe. So that can't be a coincidence. I don't take it as one, and I do not take it lightly that you invited me to be in your fellowship for this amount of time. So with those words, I will bid you adieu. I hear them calling, but I'm going to stick around for as long as I can. So thank you.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Lennix. You just touched on just the fundamental right of music and arts education. It's profound, and I'm glad you brought that to the forefront. And leading in the words of inspiration you gave our participants here is something to be very excited about as we approach the new school year coming up this coming August. Some school districts are starting August 1st, and to talk about the community you're building with the Performing Arts Center in Brownsville, and let that be another place where we can call Performing Arts Mecca, and you're right, working at the Kennedy Center, when you go into that building, the sound is unreal, unlike any other. But I'm ready to come see your place and your establishment, your partnership in that community. This is exciting because we are talking about, this is a community where we're just not one and done. We're in the arts. We have to stay together. We have to use a place to communicate and move forward and keep that energy going. So we are wishing you the very best in supporting any kind of partnership with your new community in Brownsville. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Now more than ever. Now more than ever, Brother Rhodes. So
absolutely. So thank you so much, Mr. Lennix. I know you're so busy, for your kind words and the time you shared with us. We are honored to have you a part of the Nat King Cole Generation Hope family, and we will be crossing paths very soon. God bless you, and just thank you so much, my brother.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. So friends, we're going to take a 5-minute break into our next session. Again, I hope those words from Mr. Lennix was inspiring. I was just in awe of some of the things he said, and just hit home on so many levels, just personally, professionally, spiritually, and just thinking about the bigger picture of what this means for us and our families and our students and just arts education. And so we want to give you a few minutes here again to take a very short break, 4 minutes. Should say 5, but let's say 4, to just refresh yourselves, get a good stretch in, a little process of time to reflect, and we'll get right back into our next session that we'll have this afternoon. I'll be back with you shortly.